Hey, hey, you know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! We are back, darling. We are back. We are back with Storytime with Chris. Like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, sleep time, nap time, in between time, maxing, chillaxing time, work time, study time. Anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bringing you magical stories of both fantasy, sci-fi, and anything in between. So, we're back here again with The Black Cauldron by Lloyd Alexander, and we are on chapter 9, which 9, fun fact, is one of my, it's my number, ironically, my number one favorite number. Probably after that would be 52, then 11, 17, 5, 7, and then number I, which I is an imaginary number for those who are fluent with math. We don't need to talk about that because I'm far from a mathematician. But hi. I hope everybody's having a great night on my favorite day of the week. And yes, I cleaned my glasses before I started. Also, and I'm going to just say this, for anybody that can teach me how to put closed captioning on my videos, I don't know if that's an automatic thing that YouTube does or anything like that, but I wasn't sure if there was something I had to do on my end to enable closed captioning for those who are hearing impaired or deaf, which I do have a good amount of friends that are either hearing impaired or of the deaf community. I need to know if there is a way on my end or if it just does it automatically for closed captioning. Please message me. Hi, Dan. Thank you for watching. Appreciate the support. And actually, y'all, it's really interesting because this year is really special because March of this year will be 3 years of Storytime with Chris. It's been fun. And it will continue to be fun for as long as God will allow me to do this. So, enough of my blather. All right. And no, I do not own the music you are listening to in the background. And I kind of was going for a more like calm but ominous tribal vibe. So, because one of my favorite characters has just been injured. And I'm kind of upset. No, I'm kidding. I mean, it happens in these stories. Sometimes our favorite characters do meet with misfortune, so it's okay. Chapter 9. The Brooch. Fluder's horse reared as the huntsmen turned their attack against him. The death of one of their band had roused the enemy to even greater violence and frenzy. "Take him to safety!" cried the bard. With a mighty leap, his steed cleared the bushes and streaked into the forest. The dwarf on his pony followed. With a shout of rage, the remaining huntsmen pursued them. Taran seized Luagor's bridle, and while Adion clung to the horse's mane, raced toward the edge of the clearing. Eilonwy ran to meet them. Between them, they kept Adion from falling and tore their way into the undergrowth. Gurgi, leading Melonlas, hurried after them. They ran blindly, stumbling through brambles and harsh nets of dead vines. The wind had risen, cold and biting as a winter gale, but the forest opened a little, and as the ground dipped, they found themselves in a protected hollow in a glade of alders. An alder is a type of tree, children, for those who don't know. From the back of Luagor, Adion raised his head and gestured for them to stop. His face was gray and drawn, his black hair damp on his brow. Put me down, he murmured. Leave me. I can go no longer. How do the bard and Dolly fare? They have led the huntsmen away from us, Taran answered quickly. We are safe here for a while. I know Dolly can throw them off our trail, and Fluter will help him. They'll join us again somehow, I'm sure. Rest now. I'll fetch you some medicines for the saddlebags. Carefully, they lifted Adion from his steed and carried him to a hillock, while Eilonwy brought the leather water flask. Taran and Gurgi unharnessed Luagor and set the saddle under Adion's head. The wind howled above the trees, but this sheltered spot, by contrast, seemed warm. The driven clouds broke away. The sun turned the branches to gold. Adion raised himself. His gray eyes scanned the glade, and he nodded briefly. Yes, this is a fair place. I shall rest here. We shall heal your wound, Taran replied, hastily opening a packet of herbs. You'll soon be comfortable, and if we must move, we can make a litter from branches to sling you between our horses. I am comfortable enough, Adion said. The pain is gone, and it is pleasant here, as warm as spring. At Adion's words, Taran's heart filled with terror. The quiet glade, the subtle of the alders seemed subtly menacing. Adion! He cried in alarm. This is what you dreamed! It is much like it, Adion answered quietly. You knew then, cried Taran. You knew there would be peril for you. Why did you not speak of it before? I would have sought the marshes. I would never have sought them. We could have turned back. Adion smiled. It is true. Indeed, that is why I dare not speak. I have yearned to be again at the side of my beloved Arianlen, and my thoughts are with her now. But had I chosen to return, I would ever wonder whether my choice was made through wisdom or following the wishes of my heart. I see it, this is as it must be, and the destiny laid upon me. I am content to die here. You saved my life, Taran cried. You will not lose your own life for me. We shall find our way to Caer Cauldron and Gwydion. Adion shook his head. He put his hand to his throat and undid the iron clasp at the collar of his jacket. Take this, he said. Guard it well. It is a small thing, but more valuable than you know. I must refuse, answered Taran with a smile that ill-concealed his anxiety. Such would be the gift of a dying man. But you shall live, Adion. Take it, Adion repeated. This is not my command to you, but the wish of one friend to another. He pressed the brooch into Taran's unwilling hand. Eilonwy had come with water to steep the herbs. Taran took it from her and knelt again beside Adion. Adion's eyes had closed. His face was calm. His hand lay outstretched and open on the ground. And thus he died. When their grief abated a little, the companions hollowed out a grave, lining it with flat stones. Wrapping him in his cloak, they lowered Adion into the earth and laid the turf gently over him, while Luagor whinnied plaintively and pawed the dry ground. Then they raised a mound of boulders. In a sheltered corner of the glade, Eilonwy found handfuls of small flowers still untouched by the frost. These she scattered on the grave, where they fell among the crevices and seemed to spring from the rocks themselves. They remained there silently until nightfall, without a sign of Fflewddur or Dolly. We shall wait for them until dawn, Taran said. Beyond that, we dare not stay. I fear we've lost more than one gallant friend. Adion warned us that I would grieve, he murmured to himself, and so I do thrice over. Too burdened with sorrow, too weary even to set a guard, they huddled in their cloaks and slept. Like his spirit, Taran's dreams were confused, filled with dismay and fear. In them he saw the mournful faces of the companions, the calm face of Adion. He saw Ellidyr seized by a black beast that sank its claws into him and gripped him until Ellidyr cried out in torment. The restless images gave way to a vast sweep of meadow, where Taran ran through grasses shoulder high, desperately seeking a path he could not find. Overhead, a gray bird fluttered and spread its wings. He followed it, and a path opened at its feet. He saw, too, a turbulent stream with a great boulder in the midst of it. On the boulder lay Fluter's harp, which played of itself as the wind stirred the strings. Taran was running. Then, through a trackless marsh, a bear and 2 wolves set upon him, and made to rend him with their fangs. Terrified, he sprang into a dark pool, but the water suddenly turned to dry land. The enraged beast snarled and leapt after him. He woke with a start, his heart pounding. The night had barely ended. The first streaks of dawn rose above the glade. Eilonwy stirred. Gurgi whimpered in his sleep. Taran bowed his head and put his face in his hands. The dream lay heavily upon him. He could still see the gaping jaws of a wolf and the sharp white teeth. He shuddered. He knew he must decide now whether to return to Caer Cauldron or seek the marshes of Morva. Taran looked beside him at the sleeping figures of Gurgi and Eilonwy. In little more than a day the companions had been scattered like leaves, and there remained only this pitifully small band, itself lost and driven. How could they hope to find the cauldron? Taran doubted they would even be able to save their own lives, yet the journey to Caer Cauldron would be as perilous as this quest, perhaps more so. Nevertheless, a choice had to be made. He rose after a time and saddled the horses. Eilonwy was now awake, and Gurgi was poking a tousled, twig-covered head from the folds of his cloak. "Hurry," Taran ordered. "We better get an early start before the huntsmen overtake us."
"They'll find us soon enough," Eilonwy said. "They're probably as thick as burdock between here and Caer Cauldron."
"We're going to the marshes," Taran said, "not Caer Cauldron."
"What?"
Eilonwy cried.
"Are you still thinking about those wretched swamps? Do you seriously think we can find that cauldron, let alone haul it back from wherever it is? On the other hand,"
Eilonwy went on before Taran could answer her,
"I suppose it's the only thing we can do now that you've got us in this stew, and there's no telling what Ellidyr has in mind, if you hadn't made him jealous over a silly horse."
"I feel pity for Ellidyr," Taran answered. "Adion once told me he saw a black beast on Elidyr's shoulders. Now I understand a little of what he meant."
"Well," remarked Eilonwy, "I'm surprised to hear you say that, but it was kind-hearted of you to help Islomach. I'm really glad you did. I'm sure you meant well, and that's encouraging in and of itself. It does make a person think there might be some hope for you after all."
Taran did not reply, for he was still anxious and oppressed. Although the disturbing dreams had already begun to fade, he swung astride Melonlas, Gurgi, and Eilonwy shared Luagor, and the companions swiftly rode from the glade. Taking a quick break to have some water. Staying hydrated is important. You should always be drinking 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. Not pop, not Gatorade, not 100% juice, which 100% juice is good for you, depending on what are you drinking. Like fresh squeezed orange juice, or 100% apple juice, or grape juice, or pineapple juice. Citrus stuff is always good for your immune system. Prune juice is good for you. It's not the most flavorful thing, but it is good for you. But hydrating yourself is important. It was Taran's intention to head southward, hoping somehow to come upon the marshes of Morva within another day, although he admitted to himself that he had no more than a vague idea of their distance or exact location. The day was bright and crisp. As Melonlas cantered over the frosty ground, Taran caught sight of a glittering, dew-covered web of a hawthorn branch and of the spider busily repairing it. Taran was aware strangely of vast activities along the forest trail. Squirrels prepared their winter hoard. Ants labored in their earthen castles. He could see them clearly, not so much with his eyes, but in a way he had never known before. The air itself bore special scents. There was a ripple, sharp and clear, like cold wine. Taran knew, without stopping to think, that a north wind had just begun to rise. Yet in the middle of this he noticed another scent mingle through. He turned Melonlas toward it.
since you're leading us, Eilonwe remarked, I wonder if it'd be too much to expect you to know where you're going.
There is water nearby, Taran said. We should need to fill our flasks. He hesitated, puzzled. Yes, there is a stream, he murmured. I'm sure of it. We must go there. Nevertheless, he could not quite overcome his surprise when, after a short while, they indeed came upon a swift running brook winding its way through a stand of rowans. They rowed to its bank. With a cry, Taran sharply reined in Melonlass. On a rock in the middle of the stream sat Fluter, cooling his bare feet in the water. The bard leapt up and splashed across to greet the companions. Though haggard and worn, he appeared unwounded. "Ha! Now there's a stroke of my luck, my finding you. You're finding me, rather. I hate to admit it, but I'm lost completely. Got turned around somehow after Dolly and I began to leading the huntsman a chase. Tried to make my way back to you and got lost even more. How is Adion? I'm glad you managed to—" The bard stopped. Taran's expression told him what had happened. Fluter shook his head sadly. There are few like Adion, he said. We can ill afford the loss, nor the loss of our good old Dolly. I'm not sure what happened, Fluter went on. All I know is that we were galloping at top speed. You should have seen him. He rode like a madman, popping invisible and back again, the huntsman racing after him. If it hadn't been for him, they'd have dragged me down for it's certain. They're stronger than ever now. Then my horse fell. That is to say... The bard hastily added as his harp strings tensed and jangled. I fell off. Fortunately, by that time, Dolly had led them well away. At the rate he was going, Fluter sighed heavily. What has befallen him since then? I do not know. The bard bowed up his leggings. He had walked all the distance and was quite pleased to be riding once again. Gurgi mounted behind him on Luagor. Taran and Eilonwe rode Melonlass. The bard's news lowered Taran's spirits further, for he realized now that there was little chance of Dolly rejoining them. Nevertheless, he continued to lead the companions southward. Until he could recognize a landmark, Fluter agreed this was the only course. The trouble is, he explained, if we veer too far south, we'll simply end up in the sea and miss the marshes altogether. Taran himself could offer no suggestions. Downcast, he gave Melonlass rein and made little effort to guide the stallion. The trees thinned out behind him, and the companions entered a wide rolling meadow. Taran, half dozing in the saddle, his cloak wrapped around his shoulders, roused himself uneasily. The meadow with its high grass stretching all around them was familiar. He had seen it before, where he could not quite remember. He touched Adion's clasp at his throat. Suddenly, with fear and excitement, he understood. His hands trembled at the discovery. Taran glanced overhead. A gray bird circled, gliding downward on outspread wings, then flew rapidly across the fields and disappeared from sight. That was a marsh bird, Taran said quickly, turning Melonlass. If we follow this way, he added, pointing in the direction of the bird's flight, I'm sure we'll come directly to Morva. Well done, cried the bard. I must say I never would have managed it.
Then at least one clever thing you've done today, Eilonwe admitted.
This is not my doing, Taran said with a puzzled frown. Adion spoke the truth. His gift is a precious one. He told Eilonwe hurriedly about the clasp and the dreams of the night before. Don't you see, he cried, I dreamed about Fluter's harp, and we found Fluter himself. It wasn't all my own idea to go looking for a stream. It just came to me, and I knew we would find it. Just now, when I saw the bird, that was in my dream. And there was another dream, a terrible one, of wolves. That's going to happen too, I'm sure of it. Adion's dreams were always true. He told me of them. At first, Eilonwe was loath to believe him.
Adion was a wonderful man, she said. You can't tell me it was all because of a piece of iron. I don't care how magical it is.
Which is kind of ironic, considering that Eilonwe comes from a family of sorcerers. She's got a point. She's got a point. I don't mean that, Tarn said. What I believe, he added thoughtfully, is that Adion understood these things anyway. Even with his clasp, there is much I do not understand. All I know is that I feel differently somehow. I can see things I never saw before, or smell or taste them. I can't say exactly what it is. It's strange and awesome in a way, and very beautiful sometimes. There are things that I know. Tarn shook his head. And I don't even know how I know them. Ilanwe was silent for a moment.
Yes, she said slowly. I believe it now. You don't even sound quite like yourself. Adion's clasp is a priceless gift. It gives you a kind of wisdom, she added, which I suppose is what makes assistant pig keepers need more than anything else.
And that is where we shall end for tonight. Thank you all so very much for watching. I love and appreciate you all. Please be good to each other this week. Try to be more patient with each other. Because we get to meet people like Adion. Kind and generous of spirit and wise and patient and resourceful. A natural leader. And the truth of the matter is that we never know how long we may have with these wonderful people that come in and out of our lives. So we should cherish the time that we have. So that's all I got for you. I'll see you next time, y'all. Have a great night.